What's up, about nostalgia? Dave here with a loaded pod. A lot of great stuff to talk about. Gonna talk the Succession season 4 finale. Succession is over. The Barry season 4 finale. Barry is over. HBO really hitting us with two heavy hitters the past 2 months. Excited to talk about both of those. Also, The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel season 5 on Amazon Prime Video. The series finale as well. That is over. And also from Dreamcatcher, new EP Apocalypse from Us, a really exciting rock inspired K pop release. And of course, Survivor 44 on CBS, the best reality series. I also was planning to talk about The Little Mermaid live action remake from Disney, but the movie theater next to my house the past 3 days over the weekend was closed due to electric outage. So I did not see Little Mermaid, thus we'll not be talking about this, but still a loaded pod, a lot to get into. So make sure you hit the link below, linktree.com/nostalgiapod, youtube.com/nostalgiapod, subscribe any way you can. Follow the playlist for the best songs of the year on Spotify. See the link below, and let me know what's good. Let's get into it.
What's up, welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Dreamcatcher's 8th EP, Apocalypse from Us, completing the Apocalypse trilogy. Dreamcatcher back with their first release since renewing their contracts at the end of 2022. And I think Dreamcatcher is an incredibly notable and interesting act in K-pop for several reasons. I think these reasons are pretty obvious, but one, they're signed to a small label, a label that in fact changed its name from Happy Face Entertainment to the Dreamcatcher Company. They are the face of a small label and not a big four K-pop label. So that's success you always like to see because they're kind of operating outside that like mainstream industry. And on top of that, they're further operating outside the mainstream because of their musical sound, their musical identity. Dreamcatcher, ever since they debuted in 2017, makes rock music. They have metal influence. At the most charitable, you could say it's like dark pop, but it's really like, K-pop's take on rock music. And they are by far and away the face of hearing rock in K-pop. And as a result of that, they've been very successful touring. They've been just a very successful group, despite their largely independence in terms of sonic direction and like distribution and whatnot. So I think they're just really cool in that regard. Having already renewed all 7 members, we're approaching that second act of this group. I think this 8th EP, Apocalypse from Us, the 7th EP, end of last year, one of the other Apocalypse EPs, and then the second album that came out about a year ago in 2022. This is kind of like the continuation of like this era we're in here. But yeah, I think this is a great example of what Dreamcatcher does and a perfect jumping in point for anybody new. They have a fair amount of catalog already, obviously 8 EPs, but with this one, like, it's very brief. 5 songs. One of those is the intro from Us, but right away on that intro song, the guitar solo kicks in very quickly, and you're like, ah, yes, this is what I'm in for. And then they waste no time. You get right into the title track, Bon Voyage, which has a music video out now. Man, the drums go so hard on that, and the guitar goes so hard. This is a great example of like on like the chorus, the chorus that Bon Voyage has. It's not exactly like a hook-heavy song. The chorus, it's like really metal, like really jamming out on the guitar. It goes really hard, and I think honestly, it reminds me of like what an anime opening credits song would sound like when you hear like those extended opening credits on an anime or even just a Asian cartoon, and a lot of times it has like that really extended outro like with the guitars, and like I don't know, this reminds me of exactly that vibe of like the title sequence. Really funny to me, but I think it sounds really awesome. Bon Voyage, I think, was my favorite song on the album. Kind of unexpectedly with Bon Voyage, you have a rap verse coming in, like the second verse, and it actually fits the song pretty well. I really enjoy the delivery. I think it's really well done. Following up Bon Voyage, track 3, Demian, also really hard once again. Just the guitar again just sounds so great, and I think what's really cool about Dreamcatcher too is like these are not songs designed to be trendy or, fit for TikTok or whatever, they don't really have like grabby hooks like that, big catchy choruses. That's not what it is. It's almost like a song where it's like the build of the song, the build of the instrumentals it is more of the point, the more of the attraction, and the vocals really like fit in there nicely. Whether they're really hard vocals matching the tempo of those guitars, or it's a little slowed down in between the big high moments. It's pretty interesting how they make these songs. The beginning of Demian also had a really brief reminder for me, where it's like the sound towards the beginning reminds me of the Seinfeld like scene transition like jingle song. I don't know why that's where it's bringing me, but that's where it brought me. Track 4, Propose, I also like quite a bit. The guitar line is like super distinct on that. Sounds awesome. The rap on that though really acts as more of a switch up than the rap on Bon Voyage does. I don't think the rap on Propose fits nearly as well. That can be an issue with K-pop sometimes, where like a hip hop verse is almost like ham-fisted into the song, like for conceptual reasons, and doesn't necessarily fit the rest of the vibe. I don't think it just detracts so much from Propose, but didn't quite feel seamless the way the rap does in Bon Voyage. And then the last song, To You, is I think a really nice come down song, really nice outro, taking the temperature back down, slowing down that tempo just a bit, and before you know it, the EP is over, 14 minutes. And yeah, I mean, I think just my takeaway is like shout out Dreamcatcher for really intentionally from the very beginning trying to carve out their own path and sticking to it, not jumping at any trends, not selling out like one song on the project to chase the radio or whatever. That's not what they do. And I think they've really earned that status as like the face of rock and K-pop, because the success speaks for itself. But let me know, how did you feel about Apocalypse from us, from Dreamcatcher? Let me know. And for more music reviews, more K-pop reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, welcome to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Survivor 44. Survivor Season 44 just wrapped up on CBS. Another, entry, the landmark reality series. To me, the best reality series on TV, bar none. The only one I really watch as a result, just because nothing's quite as good as Survivor when it's good. And even when it's just okay, it always compels me. And I think that's why I love Survivor so much, is putting yourself in those shoes, putting yourself in that situation, going over all the options and choices that are presented to the people and figuring out how would you have acted in that moment. Could you have thought the way they did? What would you have done differently? It's just so fun, and it's always so fulfilling to me to try and continue to think about the series. That's why I find it so engaging. I think Survivor 44 is an interesting season, right? It's now the fourth example of our new era of Survivor, the shorter duration season, post-season 40. And by and large, I think this new era has been carried by very strong casting on the part of production, and the criticisms you could put in this new era is largely, I think, production influenced, which would be an overwhelming emphasis on twists and advantages and things like that, things beyond the original core Survivor game that people have known for 20 plus years. And also, I think something that's a bit unforeseen by production, but will be on the Survivor production team to rectify in the future, which is something I do find compelling, but has presented issues with the way Survivor is currently structured, and I'll get into how this affects Season 44, is the issue of the high Survivor IQ, the high floor people bring to being on Survivor in the 2020s that they didn't bring back in the day in the 2000s. The people that go on Survivor now are all diehard Survivor fans and have been watching the show for 20 years. They think about it the way us people at home think about the show. Thus, the choices they make, the decisions they make, the rationale they have is just more advanced and more strategic, by and large, than anything from the past. And that level of consistency brings, I think, a lot of like more objective gameplay to Survivor. It's really funny to watch this show where people have a hard time keeping any secrets and will just blast anything out there. Also, alliances are so rare now at this point. People will entertain every single conversation and just kind of go up and down from there. You have someone like Danny burning his idol to keep Franny alive in a vote. And then what is it, a week, 2 weeks later for us? A few episode or two later, he votes out Franny. It's like shit like that happens. It's kind of wild. So I think with 44, I would say this is an example of good casting, but probably my least favorite cast of this new era. Certainly behind 41 and 43. And the gameplay has been good, but I think not amazing. But thankfully, this is the best example of an alliance in the new era. Of course, the Tika 3 end up running the table against all odds, and that was the most captivating thing about 44. I think really what saves the season overall, because otherwise you just have a lot of kind of misplays by some characters. You have some of the biggest personalities in the season, like Brandon and Danny and Franny, going out kind of early. The people that did remain, people like Jamie, even people like Heidi, they're not given a ton of screen time, honestly, to really stand out. And I don't know, it is what it is. Sometimes you just kind of get more straightforward gameplay. I think obviously Carolyn and Jam Jam, they got so much screen time right away. They really carried the pre-merge stuff. And then you watch them make it all the way to the very end as well. It was actually a pretty fun storyline. That being said, I think there was a lot of fear that Carolyn could end up being like a Gabler type win, like in 43. And it didn't go that way. And I actually think Jam Jam's performance at the final tribal council really sold him as a winner and makes him a really capable and deserving winner. But in the process, of course, what happened? Carson was taken out at 4 at Fire, just like last season where Jesse was taken out at 4 at Fire. The biggest threat, the clear winner, gets taken out at 4. That is a trend that continues. And that is a trend that continues to happen because there's just a outsized importance placed on winning that challenge and thus being able to decide the Fire. Now, there's of two minds, right? Oh, well, that immunity challenge should have more weight because it's the last one. I understand that, but I just kind of don't like the whole crux of fire making. Like Heidi felt that she had no choice but to go into fire herself and take out Carson. And despite all that, she still had really no compelling case to win. And I don't know, I just think I just don't like it as an option because you want the best people there at the end. And it's getting to the point where Survivor IQ is so advanced that the move now is to be as under the radar as possible, keep yourself as safe as you can, and then to make a big move as late as possible, taking out a presumptive threat at the time and putting yourself in that threat's place and get to the end. And that's just not as compelling to the viewer because the person who's pulling that off was not a key cog in the storytelling earlier in the season. That's on production to find a way how to fix that because the gameplay of the contestants is going to be decided by the format that the show is in. So, it's no one else's fault. Production needs to figure that kind of stuff out. I thought Jam Jam was the correct pick of the final 3 because really him and Carolyn had a very similar game. They were together the entire time. They were almost always on the right or wrong side of the same votes. They're usually voting together. Less so at the end, but Jam Jam was able to, I think, articulate why he deserved it better. We're really talking about his social game and how he could read people's eyes and stuff, really highlighting that. And I think he's a pretty compelling winner as someone who's on the bottom for so long, got votes cast against him constantly, was able to come in to the merge at the bottom and take people out that target him, having just a bias against people and then turning into a power player. It's a compelling win. Also nice that he's the first queer winner in over 15 years. Would not have guessed it had been that long, but awesome. And he's also a winner who had no advantages. Incredibly impressive to pull that off. But again, it kind of speaks to just the way things work now. It's you win a lot of immunities, people are going to get you out, like Franny. You get advantages, you play a little flashy, like Danny, you're dead. You rise to the top in the later half, everyone's gunning for you, like Carson. That's just how it goes. Um, I think Carson was pretty compelling. I'd like to see him back. Obviously, he's quite young. I'm sure he'll be back on a returning season. He also highlights a huge issue that Survivor 44 brought up, which was the fact that Carson's able to 3D print Survivor puzzles at home and practice and have the confidence that he will encounter those very same puzzles on the show when he goes on. I mean, that's just an L on CBS and production. Like, spend more money and make more puzzles. That cannot happen. Like, it cannot be that easy. Hats off to Carson for pulling that off, doing that prep. It's not his fault, but he should not be able to do that. And that's on production. They just need to make more puzzles. You should not be able to practice puzzles like that because we know how integral puzzles are as an equalizer type aspect of many challenges, especially in the merge. So I was not a fan of that overall. Yeah, I think the other thing that was kind of interesting about 44 was production introducing fake idols themselves. Obviously, contestants have created fake idols to try and dupe opponents before, which is a great thing, really fun. Doesn't happen often, but we like it. But production putting like a real produced fake idol in there and having them look differently, tribe to tribe. I think that's just an issue of like you're approaching like the dam and like you're going to break the water pretty soon where like people are just going to be so paranoid and have no confidence in anything being real or not. I think there kind of needs to be a line of what production does versus what the contestants can create out of thin air themselves, by making own idols. I think that it's a bit risky to have that. I think it would have been fun if 44 featured Heidi correctly playing her idol and really like ratcheting up tension about her chances to win. Thankfully, in the finale, her winning immunity for the first time and then putting herself in fire to take out Carson. That was compelling. That added a lot of tension. But I really would have loved if the idol was played correctly. You think about it, there was not a lot of huge idol action in 44, despite the myriad fake idols, including people that found fake idols and all that. Alas, it happened. 45, I'm looking forward to it because it's going to be 90-minute episodes officially, which is great because I think there's so much compelling stuff about Survivor, and I think the social games of players, the alliances, the character dynamics, there'll be so much more to flesh out in a 90-minute episode because we know that each episode we watch is over a 3-day period. So I think it won't feel fluff at all. It's certainly worthy of that. And you'll probably see more reward challenges as well. The one disappointment I have is that 45 is not, in fact, a returnee season. I think there was some thought that, after 41 through 44, with this new era, 45 would be the first returnee season of this new era. That is not the case with 45, so we will continue to cross our fingers and wait for that because, as I said, casting has been so strong in this new era that there's so many compelling people to want to bring back. I think you can make a really awesome all-star cast, and that's, not even including any winners. Like, you could really nail it across 41 through 44. So we'll hope that we get a returnee season perhaps in 2024. But in the meantime, 45 will be back in September. I'll be talking about that when that comes out. But let me know, how did you feel about Survivor 44? How did you compare it to other New Era seasons? Did you like it more or less? And for more TV reviews, subscribe. And I'll see you next time. What's up? Welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel Season 5, the final season. Maisel is over on Prime Video after premiering way back at the end of 2017. It's been a long time coming. I'm going to talk about the finale, the season as a whole, the series as a whole. I'm going to spoil everything in just a second. Before I do, I'll just say that I thought Maisel Season 5 was a kind of up and down mixed bag type season. I liked the way it wrapped up given how it had gone to that point. But I think there's a lot of like kind of sins that this series has had that didn't necessarily start with Season 5, to be clear, but largely kind of pushed this show into a box. There were some decisions made with Season 5 that I didn't care about that much. I just didn't kind of like where they went, and I'll get into all this. So let's just get into it. Let's just spoil everything. So Maisel Season 5, I think the big thing that is a hang-up for me with Season 5 is the flashbacks, or the flash forwards, really. If you think about what we got with Season 5 of Maisel, jumping forward in time, sometimes jumping decades in time, we very quickly learned several key pieces of information with this series. One of which was that Maisel and Midge and Susie fell out and were not on good terms. Midge did become successful, and world famous and all that. Susie also became incredibly successful with many other famous clients. We learned all that information incredibly fast, you know? And to me, it really killed a lot of the dramatic stakes with this season because Marvel's Mrs. Maisel, this whole run has been like, can Midge make it? Against all odds, this 50s, 1960s housewife, mother, single mother with 2 young kids. Can she become a stand up comedian in a man's world, in a man's comedy scene? And like we've been watching her, go up and down, and I think a big frustration many people have had with this series to this point has been watching the Midge character make a lot of the same mistakes over and over again. Kind of a problem with the writing, a problem with the plotting, and to very quickly in the beginning of season 5 get told that everything people had been kind of wondering about actually did come true, and then we would actually learn some of the details and see that fleshed out after the fact, after the suspense had been killed. I don't know. That's a really weird decision to me. And I think just kind of a product of the Marvel's Mrs. Maisel as a series really just went on too long. And I think Amy Sherman Palladino, Dan Palladino, they just weren't as like creatively fulfilled and in the mix with making this show anymore. I think this could have been a much tighter, captivating series if it was perhaps smaller in scope and how it worked. That being said, what we got, I was quite disappointed in, like the killing of the stakes, because alongside that, I feel like we spent a lot of time in season 5 watching a lot of the same old stuff. We watch Midge get put in a situation that's not a good fit for her, and watch her make a lot of the same mistakes that we had been accustomed to seeing. In this case, becoming a TV writer on the Gordon Ford show. I liked Reed Scott from Veep as Gordon Ford, like a Tonight Show type stand-in there. Reed Scott's really good at doing that, like two-faced, swarmy, comedic timing guy. Like I like that performance. I didn't love that situation for Midge. I did like how it ended in the finale, 4 minutes. I thought watching Midge get that big break with that 4-minute set she does on the Gordon Ford show after seeing how long it took her to pull off getting that spot on the series and all that, and thinking that's not actually going to happen at the end. I like that. However, what would have been really great about this finale if we didn't know that Midge becomes world famous and successful going in. Because then when we see Gordon Ford pull the rug out and say that he's going to put Midge up there as one of his writers and clearly start to just try and embarrass her and be sexist to her as his line of questioning goes, watching that play out in real time, not knowing how it would go, I think that would have been really fulfilling even further than watching her do the 4 minutes and seeing it actually happen. That's just me. Other things that I thought were a bit pedestrian about this series, the Rose storylines, watching her kind of do a lot of the same old stuff, the matchmaker mafia stuff, playing out that string again in a whole new season. Just the usual, like, incompetent homekeeping stuff. It's kind of blah to me, honestly, as much as I love, like, Rose, love the performance for Maren Hinkle. Abe, I think Abe is generally a highlight of the series. Tony Shalhoub's performance is just so funny. His stuff with the Village Voice, and nothing too great this time. Probably the best moment of Abe, beyond his general comedy. I think his comedy is really funny, especially with the kids this year, with Midge's kids. I thought that was probably some of the funniest stuff. But the scene he has with some of his Village Voice colleagues at the dinner table, where he, like, it's basically like a backdoor, like, introduction of feminism to this series, and having Abe, of all people, be the spokesman for this, and realizing that he should have done things differently and changing how he thought about stuff. Of course, telling this to a bunch of men who don't necessarily agree with him, doing this in the early 60s, a time that's not mainstream thought. It's like, this show, and I think the Palladinos in general, have never been super adept at, like, really handling like weightier themes like that. But I think it was pretty interesting because the writing matched with Shalhoub's performance in that scene, where Shalhoub just kind of monologues as Abe waxes on about the regrets he has about how he's acted and things he could have done differently. That is pretty effective for sure. That being said, like watching Rose and Abe in the finale, like, rush to try and get a cab and they can't get one, and like all the things they do and say as they're running in the city traffic. That's just funny stuff because those they know the comedy. Moish and Shirley, Joel's parents. Some of the shtick got a little annoying to me earlier in the season, just because I think they can be a bit much. But they also felt like they know exactly what those characters are, and like I thought it was an effective enough like having them get back on good terms in the shower in the finale, whatever. They're definitely secondary characters in the ensemble. Another mistake that I guess you can't be too hard on the creators, but writing off May in the beginning of episode 1 was pretty stark. Obviously, I think it's a symptom of Joel being on this show, being in this plot, and thus his parents as well, was more a product of like series contracts and filling out the ensemble more so than like dramatic intention. They had to find ways to keep Joel on the series. And it turns out having this whole romantic subplot with May in the past seasons didn't amount to much of anything. And in the process, they wrote the season, they went into production, just as a little movie called Everything Everywhere All at Once began its run, leading to a Best Picture win and a Stephanie Hsu Best Supporting Actress nomination. It would have been really cool if that momentum had carried over onto this show. Would have been an unexpected win for Maisel. Didn't happen, obviously. We don't get a lot of Lenny Bruce in the season. Obviously, the big highlight of season 4, the reason I thought season 4 was the second best season of this series, was really the payoff of Lenny and Midge at the end of season 4. The Lenny Carnegie Hall iconic set, Lenny and Midge finally consummating their attraction, and the conversations they have, on the stage at Carnegie and stuff. That was just so moving, and that was the thing people were most invested in watching this show. I never wanted to see Joel and Midge get back together, and they damn near tried with season 5. Thankfully, they didn't. I thought it was handled well enough considering they just had to keep Joel on the show. But Lenny, you see him in, I believe it's the beginning of episode 2, which is part of the opening premiere. And, he's going off to California, him and Midge meet at the airport. And I was worried that was going to be like the last scene and they have together. Thankfully, it isn't. That being said, I think the way they handle it's a bit interesting, right? So what we get in the finale, the opening scene in the finale is Lenny Bruce, Luke Kirby, on set in 1965. And it's like a really rough set. It's not funny. It's kind of Lenny droning on about his legal issues, and you can tell it's just not working. And he's definitely a mess. That was actually, in real life, his penultimate show before his death. And that obviously conveys the issues Lenny had that the show had hinted at and shown earlier. And then at the very end of the finale, we see this dinner scene at a Chinese restaurant between Midge and Lenny, which is actually a flashback to later in the night after they got romantically involved in season 4. And it's just kind of this conversation about Lenny being really the one person, one man, I guess you could say, that truly believe in Midge's talent, Midge's potential and stuff like that. And it's like a nice scene. Doesn't necessarily communicate anything new between them, but you understand the origin of the lucky number, like fortune cookie piece of paper that Midge had earlier in the episode when she goes on the Gordon Ford show. So as a result, we never see Midge learn about Lenny's tragic death. We never see how that affects her. We just kind of see her being concerned earlier in the first scene when Susie tells her that he's a mess. That's a choice, for sure. I know this show has always treated Lenny Bruce. Any of the stuff they showed on stage was always like his actual real words. They never added anything. Obviously, everything else is like historical fiction, which is fun. Obviously, we like that. The Lenny Bruce performance from Luke Kirby is probably the single greatest thing this show has done. Obviously, that got 2 Emmy nominations, including a win in Guest Actor category. I would have loved to see more. I would have loved to see how that affected Midge, because frankly, that was the thing I cared about most watching this series through 5 seasons. And again, because season 5 killed all the dramatic stakes and spoiled the fact that Midge is going to make it, obviously, I was moved. I thought it was really great watching her kill it on the Gordon Ford show, and you get to see the big break happen. I just wish I would have known if there was some, doubt as a viewer in the moment. Alas. I think my favorite overall episode is episode 6, because that's that Susie roast episode. Thought that was just really funny, great episode. And I think kind of highlights like what this show has been about in season 5 has really been the Midge-Susie friendship. That has been like the anchor point that this series has been communicating. Obviously, I'm just speaking for me, was more invested in the Lenny stuff, but clearly the Susie Midge friendship and the ups and downs of that was what this show wanted to communicate. And seeing the flash forward to 2005, the very last scene of the season 5 and series finale, watching Midge in her older years be incredibly successful, but also incredibly isolated despite her wealth. But at least she still had mended her friendship with Susie, and they talk on the phone watching Jeopardy. It's pretty moving. Yeah, man. Marvelous Miss Maisel season 5. Um, you know, not my favorite season, not my second favorite season, but for all the faults the series had brought into the season, I think it was effective enough way to wrap things up. And obviously, shout out Rachel Brosnahan, truly breakout role. Would love to see what she's up to next. We know the Paladinos will get up to something soon. And if you think about the legacy of this series, which in its early years was a big, comedy Emmy darling, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is, I think, up there, among the signature Amazon Prime Video series. You think of what those shows would be. It's Fleabag and The Boys and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And, in the years to come, probably Lord of the Rings of Power as well. But Maisel has been a real anchor for Amazon, even as the critical attention, the awards attention, and ratings have declined. It's obviously a smashing success, and probably a example of perhaps TV of the past, right? As we're moving into a different entertainment industry environment with with the economy and the way studios are approaching things and approaching costs of series. This was a lavish period production series with a ensemble cast from an A-list creator. This was not a cheap show to make, and obviously cost doesn't really matter to Amazon, but there's a lot of reporting about the up and down identity of what it means to make content at Amazon. We're seeing that with Citadel right now, so this might end up being the last gasp of a bygone era when it comes to TV filmmaking. We'll see. Obviously, too early to say that now. But let me know, how did you feel about Marvelous Mrs. Maisel season 5? How did you feel about the series as a whole? Let me know. I'll be in the comments. And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, Welcome Back to Nostalgia? Dave here with a review of Barry season 4. The final season of Barry is over. Series finale. I'm going to get into all that, as well as my thoughts on the series as a whole. The 4-season run, HBO comedy drama from Alec Berg and Bill Hader. So before I get into spoilers, I'll just say that I liked season 4, and more than anything, I'm just really impressed with the growth that this show has had. Where this show began is very different from where it ended, and I think this show had really a impressive level of growth at that, and just the dramatic development has been really quite impressive. And yeah, let's just get into it. What's up with Barry season 4? I think just going off that point, Barry began as like a Hollywood satire, right? You have this hitman character, veteran who goes to acting class to try and switch up his life. And it's like a really, I think, poignant like satirization, lampooning of like Hollywood culture, like acting class and things like that. And the double life of the hitman trying to become an actor, become a real person, and like where the show went from there, which it was at its funniest at that time, and over the course of season 1 and 2 playing that out, and then really with season 3 and 4 getting incredibly dark, really a full-on drama at this point. It really should not be running the comedy Emmy category for this final season. That would be ridiculous. And it's really about like these characters' psyches and the growth that they have as people, and I think the comment that the show is presenting is just changed quite a bit. And I think it's not a show that's nearly as fun to watch as it once was, because again, it's quite dark. There's brief moments of graphic violence. We got that in the finale with the shootout between Fuchs and Hank's people, but really, I think the journey that like the core characters go on in their lives and in their own heads in terms of how they rationalize things, that's really what this show is about. And you would not have seen that coming with season 1. And really, I think hats off to Berg and Bill Hader, who had a strong, clear vision for this series and set out to do a very specific thing with how they wrapped up Barry. And definitely one of the best, HBO shows of the last, 5+ years. Um, I think with season 3 for me, I wasn't quite as high on it as like the early seasons, and I think perhaps it was just that transition point. But the show gets quite like metaphysical in season 3, which again is something you would not have seen coming in the early seasons. And season 4 makes, I think, a really specific choice in the middle part of the season, which is this time jump, really I believe for the first time, like a time jump, time skip forward, as Barry and Sally are on the lam after Barry breaks out of prison, and then you realize they have a kid and they're living really in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest, I assume, and living these really private, like specific lives as they try and raise this kid in solitude. And it's it presents itself as like being like a dream or like a fugue state of some kind based off what we had seen, like on the beach in season 3. And you watch like the subsequent episodes and you realize, actually, no, that was just a straight up time skip. That really happened. It was definitely a choice, I think, to do that and to give Barry and Sally a child. Um, and I think that's one of the weaker parts of season 4 and the wrap up of this series is the kid, John, who, at the very end, there's a further time skip and you see John aged up a bit, played by Jada Martell. And you watch this hokey Warner Brothers, we assume, film about the Barry and Gene Cousineau story, and like John accepting what the public has accepted as really happened in this story. And it's like a really hokey film that's a funny juxtaposition of like how Barry was, because Barry is not a hokey show. Um, but I don't know if that moment completely lands because we don't spend a whole lot of time with John. I think thematically it's a nice connection to how other characters are going, where John's like seeing this and rationalizing to himself that his dad wasn't actually the vile human that he might have thought he was, because that's not what everyone else thinks. Barry uh, didn't go down that road in the court of public opinion, funny enough. But yeah, I think that was kind of an interesting thing that don't necessarily landed, which is the kid. I think the Sally stuff and the time skip is really impressive, and also it's like a really like makes you have like no remaining doubt about like the deranged nature that Barry has gone down, where he will listen to like religious podcasts to rationalize his horrible decisions and why he's a bad person and things like that. Like that's all incongruous. And I think the best thing about the time skip actually is what happens with Hank and the NoHo Hank character. That character development, that character growth is perhaps the signature achievement of Barry as a series. Honestly, like Anthony Carrigan, amazing performance across 4 seasons. But when you first meet NoHo Hank, it's a comic relief character. This funny part of the Chechen mob. And at one point in the story making process, Hank was supposed to die, and that was all fine and good. But you would not have expected to have this really dramatic path with NoHo Hank, and seeing him become successful, become straight, in the eyes of the law, more or less, in the time skip, and yet him having this really debilitating like pain because of what he had to do to achieve that. That just is not something I would have ever seen coming with Barry, and that's a really impressive stuff earlier in the season where Barry betrays Cristobal and kills all of their men in the sand silo, and gets back in with the Chechens, with the Colombians kind of neutralized. And then Hank, knowing that Cristobal needs to stay with him, otherwise he'll be taken out, and like the pain that he feels when his love rejects him for what he has done. And then of course Cristobal gets whacked as a result. Like Hank is broken at that point, and like that's kind of what the show is about. It's about broken people. As Sally, her despair is kind of continuous throughout the seasons 3 and 4, but of course in season 3 she brought a lot of that on herself in terms of her, the way she moved in the industry and how she was a really selfish and arrogant person. And you kind of see that manifested again in season 4, where she's kind of being a coach for someone who's clearly a worse actor than her, but like a more conventionally attractive woman, and like you can see Sally's um, the longing she has that of what she could have had in the industry. I really liked how that went. Um, Fuchs also has quite the journey on this show. Again, starts out as the handler of Barry the Hitman at the beginning of the show and kind of a surrogate father figure. And, I think where that goes, season 3 is kind of out of the picture, like away. And then I think his season 4 stuff's really fun, right? Like him, Fuchs being the Raven, this alter ego criminal mastermind identity he's put on himself, and then actually manifesting that in prison by kind of toughening out the line of questioning that's been put on him when the FBI, I believe, was trying to ascertain stuff that Fuchs really didn't know. Um, and Fuchs kind of makes himself into the Raven, faked it until he made it, basically. And then, against all odds, you have this like tete-a-tete with Hank towards the end, but Fuchs learning that Barry had a kid kind of snaps back to what semblance of a heart he once had, realizing that he wronged Barry and fucked him up for years back in the day, diving on John to save Barry's kid and shepherding Barry's kid back to Barry. It's kind of a full circle moment. Now, when I first saw that, I thought like Fuchs in his fucked up mind was like, oh, I can make a new Barry. I thought that's actually where he was going with it, but actually I liked how it went. Obviously, Hank dies in that shootout because Hank just was unwilling to admit what he had done, admit how painful that was to Fuchs, what he had done to Cristobal, and rather would go out in a blaze of glory than acknowledge what he had done. And like that, like I think theme of denial was like really present in like the back half of this season. Again, like John, Barry's Sally's son, him watching the movie, you understand that denial theme, but we don't necessarily have enough time with him to have that necessarily resonate. But I think, like the big shock of the finale, watching Barry really for the first time come to terms with how fucked up he is, how he was, and he cannot rationalize and deny things to himself any further. He's going to turn himself in and clear Gene Cousineau's name in the process. And yet, Gene just decides that he'd rather kill Barry, kill the one who killed his girlfriend, Janice, way back at the end of season 1. And in the process, Gene goes to jail, life in prison as a result for killing Barry, and the law believes he killed Janice, even though it was Barry. And Gene had a chance, had his own out, but he also just couldn't. He couldn't go down that road. It's funny, like all the characters in Barry are bad for one reason or another. It's very similar to Succession, I guess. Watching these final seasons back to back over the last 2 months has been quite the ride for sure. Barry definitely a lot less lacking on the laughs than Succession. That's obvious, but yeah, I think the Gene stuff. When a few episodes back in season 4, you think, oh, Gene has a way back in after being hiding, but like I think perhaps that can be like a bit of like a point of contention for like some viewers, which is how things kind of went with Gene. Like if you think about it, like the FBI and Jim Moss being like kind of duped into just going down the wrong road and having the wrong conclusion about things. Gene's son the same way, and I don't know, like there was a lot of like evidence earlier in the show's run about Barry's role as a criminal. Like there were other investigations into him just last season. So it's a bit neat and tidy how all things went. I think we can yada yada that. The one thing that jumped out to me in the moment, and I saw some other people noting this as well, was that Jim Moss was like really lax in how he had Barry like tied up in his home after tracking him down at the back half of this season. Like Barry just gets to escape, and Jim Moss didn't seem as concerned about that. Again, the person who killed his, a daughter. Even if he believes Cousineau coaxed him to do it, this was still the actual murderer, right, Barry, and that felt a bit incongruous, I suppose. But yeah, I think overall, man, like Barry is a is a show that I think absolutely should be celebrated just for what it achieved and what it grew into over the course of 4 seasons. This is definitely a show that could have continued to run for a long time, especially in its earlier iteration. Like, is the hitman living the double life going to be found out? Tune in next week and let's see. Like, this could have been a much simpler but still satisfying type of show than it ended up being. But I think Hader has openly said that he has like real aspirations to be a director, and like this was kind of his way in to doing that, being a film director specifically, and him being able to be the creative force behind this show, directing, you know, the back half of season 3, all of season 4, like just kind of being that talent and showing the industry what he can do and what he's interested in. It's really impressive. So I'll be really interested to see where this competes in the Emmys. Like, this needs to be run in drama. Like, there's funny stuff, but I think the funnier stuff now in Barry in season 4 was like watching Barry walk into Walmart and buy a bunch of machine guns and then storm out through like the toy aisle. Like, that's the kind of humor it was. But like, Hank was not nearly as funny as he once was in season 1. This, I don't think you can good conscience call this a comedy, but because it's a half-hour runtime, the old like definitions of how we talked about in classified TV almost position this as a comedy. And I hope those like stringent definitions don't do that to this show. That being said, like, I think if you put Barry up against most comedies that are out, like, it's better than those shows. Like, I think Barry versus, The Bear versus Abbott Elementary would be an interesting battle, right? But Barry should be running drama, if you ask me. We'll see what happens later this fall when when that goes down, and I'll be talking about the Emmys when they come up. But let me know, how'd you feel about Barry? What did you feel about this growth, season 1 to season 4? Did you like it? Did you like an earlier version of the show more? Did you like how this wrapped up? And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. What's up, welcome back to Nostalgia. Dave here with a review of Succession, Season 4, the final season of Succession. I'm going to talk about the finale, the full season, my thoughts on the series. I'm going to spoil everything, but before I do, I just want to say Succession is in the television pantheon, one of the greatest shows of all time. I think that's incredibly clear, not up for debate. And frankly, I would say Succession is on that HBO Mount Rushmore. Now, that is a tall task, a high bar to clear, but I don't know. I think, The Undeniables, Sopranos, The Wire. After that, I'd have Game of Thrones and Succession in there. Next tier down, Leftovers, Veep, Deadwood. You can argue that. My point is, I think Succession is absolutely spectacular. They nailed this finale, and I'll spoil everything in a second, but like, I think what makes Succession so great, so memorable, so important, and so excellent is just, I think, a lot of obvious things that have been the case for a while, but the execution has always been so good, and this final season really nailed it. A big part of this is Succession kind of surprising everyone, deciding that season 4 was the final season. That was not publicized until the season was about to come out. That was honestly a real masterstroke by Jesse Armstrong, and having the show go out with you wanting more. This show ended with clearly plenty of runtime, plenty of meat on the bone with all of these characters that are so finely drawn at this point that this show could have easily gone on for several more seasons. And if the show was on Showtime, it would have gone on for several more seasons. But Jesse had a plan, and him in the writer's room just deserves so much credit for the vision that is Succession. And I just found it really riveting the entire time. I was hooked on the show from the get-go. We've reviewed every past season on the show as well. Check those out. But, I think it just really is a show that got better and better. And season 4, I just found incredibly riveting the entire time. And that just goes to all the things you expect: the amazing acting, the amazing characterization, the absolutely impeccable writing. I saw someone tweet tonight that Succession does Succession does talking scenes like John Wick does action scenes, and that is 100% true. Like, it's just really the most compelling drama you can have, and it's gone. 40 hours or 40 episodes, 30 episodes, whatever it is, an amazing run, and let's get into that. But just shout out Jesse Armstrong, shout out this writers room. they really smashed this, and they should really be proud. This is going to run away with Emmys this fall, and I think the acting Emmy battle and like the actors going up against themselves, that'll be very interesting to watch because not everyone can win when you're in the same category. But yeah, let's get into it. So, in addition to Succession really nailing it with the kind of surprise fourth season being the final season decision, spoilers from here on out, another absolute masterstroke with Succession season 4 was the decision to take out have Logan Roy die earlier than expected. I think it was incredibly clear to most viewers that Logan would pass sometime during this season. It's in the name of the show, after all. But to have it happen in episode 4, I believe, episode 4, right? 3 or 4? 4. That was unexpected, shocking. And of course, the episode when it happens is amazing. But the decision to do that early and have so much additional runtime with just the kids and having them go through everything without the gravitational force that was their lives, that was this show's center, Logan Roy, played by Brian Cox, like to have the show enter its like final act with like 6 hours on the runway still. Absolutely amazing decision. They made the most out of that choice. I thought it was really good. Obviously, Brian Cox recently, once the press tour wrapped up with episode 4, he's recently said that he thought it was too early. And I mean, you can't blame him personally, but I have to disagree. I think they really crushed it with that decision. And just, from then on out, like, there's just episode after episode that's just a fucking banger, man. But like, if we just backtrack, like, even like the last moments we get with Logan, he's barely on the season after all, right? And we get some, like video footage and like the Living Plus presentation, like, video. Like, you see Logan after episode 4, but obviously not in life. But if we backtrack, like the Logan in the present that you do get, I think there's some really poignant moments, right? Like the moment, I believe it's episode 1 or 2, the only real moment of Logan's, the only genuine moment he seems to have in his life anymore is when he goes to the diner with his bodyguard and has like a really frank conversation with him. Absolutely impeccable scene. Communicates so much after you have this episode where he has all these hangers on and people in his life that want something from him. And like Logan kind of communicating like that loneliness to the audience via that conversation with his bodyguard, I thought was really masterful, right? And then episode 3, Connor's wedding. The karaoke bar scene at the very end, the famous quote, of course, I love you, but you're not serious people. Great meme, but also like that whole moment of Logan basically being as honest and sorry, apologetic as he possibly could be to his children was in that moment right there. It was amazing. And you combine that with an absolutely impeccable Connor moment. In general, this is the best Connor Roy season. Alan Ruck, shout out to him. Connor Roy, I'll get him in a second, but like Connor playing off that, in the karaoke bar scene and being, I think, really lucid and seeing the board better than his younger siblings. Really, really moving. And then right after that, Logan dies. It's like this huge thing. And I think what's cool about Succession season 4 is that largely each episode is like a day in the life. Like it's only taking place over like one day, more or less. The finale changes it up, but generally speaking, it's like short compressed periods of time, and it's all pretty quick, right? Because we build up to the funeral for Logan at the very end of the season, and it's actually, I think, a bit of like dissonance to the audience, where it's like if you're watching this week to week over the past 10 weeks, which has been absolutely thrilling to engage with the show and talk about this show every week. Again, week to week is the way to go with dramas, no doubt. But the characters have progressed such little time, and meanwhile, it's been 2 months for us. And I think like a few weeks back, or 2 weeks back, 1 week back, when they go to the funeral, and like Shiv has a comment about being like, "Oh, sorry, my dad just died." It's like, your dad just died? Well, I didn't know. For her dad had just died. It only been a few days, but for us, it had been 2 months. Kind of interesting thing that you wouldn't normally think about a week-to-week viewing pattern where like you're sitting with plot points longer than the actual characters you're watching are experiencing them. Yeah, great Connor season, right? You would never expect like that to be a thing with the show through the first three seasons. Like Alan Ruck, amazing casting, amazing performance, but Connor, of course, has always been the comic relief. He's the joke, and that is still the case in season four. But I think he just really gets to blossom as a character and have actually incredible self awareness, and Willa as well. Like, great season for her. Their relationship kind of being out on Front Street for what it is, the transactional nature that it is. And Connor running a vanity campaign for president, sticking with it, all that stuff. I don't know. I thought it was like really captivating just because like Connor in the moments he does have on the show, he often in this season he often had like really I think, perceptive things to say, usually to his other siblings. So, I mean, I really loved all the Connor stuff throughout the season. Um, yeah, man. Let's see what else. So, I think there's like standout episodes, right? Obviously, we know Connor's wedding, episode 3, the death scene, the death episode, episode 4. Like these are really huge things, right? I think like once episode 4, honeymoon states happens and Logan dies, it's just banger after banger. Like episode 5, kill list, fucking incredible stuff, right? This is when the Roys go to Europe to the Gojo retreat to treat with Madsen right after their dad has died, and of course builds up to I think all of it's like tete-a-tete, um, in the retreat, which I think is just compelling conversation after conversation, so good, culminating in this rooftop meeting, or not rooftop, mountaintop meeting between Kendall, Madsen, and Roman. And Roman eventually decides that Roman explodes, right? It explodes on Madsen. Really amazing stuff. But like the build up to that, where like this season really comes into focus, right? Where Kendall and Rome and Shiv, so they think, are all deciding to scuttle the deal, keep ATN, not sell to Gojo, and that becomes like our through line plot point throughout the rest of the season. I thought Kill List was really good. Learning a lot of stuff about the other people that work for Madsen is really fun. Some great Greg and Tom stuff there. But like I thought that was a dynamite episode. And then you follow that up the following week with episode 6, Living Plus, where I think there's like a big like piece of like character growth, character momentum for Kendall and of Roman. Roman backing out on the pitch, on the thing, leaving Kendall out to dry basically, and having Kendall smash it, crush it, which of course selling bullshit, not actually delivering on something, but he's delivering on the bullshit in a way that indie investors in the stock market likes and stuff, and like that's the grift that they've been into, right? That's how they work. That's how their leadership is, like seeing that kind of stuff, right? Seeing the gleam in Kendall's eye in that episode as Kendall is happy to become Icarus and fly as closest to the sun as he possibly can, because that's just what he craves. That's the thing that fuels him. Meanwhile, Roman thinks that's what he wants, but is actually a really small person and truly just like a fucked up in the head kind of guy for many reasons. I thought Living Plus was excellent. Like it keeps going, right? Like episode 8, America Decides. God, I mean that's Succession. I don't think Succession can make you feel any worse than how that episode makes you feel, right? And I think that's kind of leads into like what kind of show this is, right? Like these are all detestable people for their character flaws, as well as their enormous wealth and how they flaunt it, their lack of care for other people. Like these are all flawed, bad people that we like on watching the show, and yet, like many of the other hit dramas of yesteryear, this era of difficult men on TV, you end up rooting for people. You end up rooting for Don Draper and Walter White and Tony Soprano, even though they're bad. And sometimes that's like a disconnect between the creators and the writers of that very medium, right? Like they don't want you to like these people, but you just get attached to them. You get incredibly attached to the characters on Succession, including someone like Logan Roy, who is a bad person. Someone like Roman, who in America Decides just shows you how vile a person he actually is, and obviously the parallels to Fox News and the 2020 election, things like that. It's very obvious. A lot of the lampooning of the Murdoch family has been very clear and on the nose by design on Succession for the past 4 years. That's nothing new. But I thought America Decides like actually hits really close to home as an episode while also making you feel really bad for being invested in the journey of these characters. Shout out Justin Kirk, who plays Jared Mencken, the Republican nominee for president. Amazing performance from him. It's like really specific like style. And like you don't get a lot of him, but I think that's like a really like nice like zeroed in performance from Kirk. And I think like a kind of underrated thing about how Succession wraps up from there with the last 3 episodes, like they don't tell you if Mencken ended up actually winning. They kind of hint at stuff, right? This stuff, I believe Wisconsin, right? It's like, did the votes get fully counted? Did ATN pull Arizona and call a state for Trump or Mencken that didn't actually go that way? Did they actually win the presidency or not? They don't tell you if that actually happened in the world of Succession or not. You get the reference, you understand what it's acknowledging, but that's not what this show is about, because the finale was concerned about what's actually important about the show, and it's the Roy family and those family dynamics. And I just thought the finale was masterful. It's just you watch the 3 core siblings, Shiv, Ken, and Rome, and they seem to come together, especially once they learn that Shiv is not going to be the American CEO for Gojo. Madsen doesn't want someone as independent and as ideas driven as Shiv wants to be as a leader. Madsen wants an underling and thus picks Tom in her place. Tom, someone who, of course, throughout the season says he's willing to serve. That's the kind of person he wants to be, right? Because he's addicted to power. Watching all that go through, it's very reminiscent of the season 3 finale, right? It was like the siblings came together. They're going to finally win. They're going to get this shit done. And despite everything they've been through, all the fucked up shit that Roman did in 2 episodes back, Kendall, despite all his flaws, having his shit together, Shiv trying to find some kind of purpose, fulfillment, leading up to this board meeting. Riveting shit. Absolutely riveting shit. Whipping the votes, right? And it goes through. And man, they throw a curve with 20 inches of break, man. Everyone watching this shit swung and missed. No one saw that coming. Did I think it was going to go right for them? I was not confident. Definitely not. Again, does it go right for them in season 3? No. Tom fucks them. What happens this time, though? I think what needed to happen, right? There's been a lot of like talk about who's going to win Succession, who wins. And to me, like, I never really viewed it as a show where like there'd be a winner, right? Like there's a lot of joking about would cousin Greg win. Well, Greg definitely did not win this episode, man. Flipping on Tom the very last minute, tipping off Kendall that Shiv was the not getting it, right? And then Tom actually becomes CEO because the deal does go through, and now all the capital, the goodwill that Greg has built up for years with Tom is gone, right? Even if he might still be working for Tom, Greg got absolutely smashed at the end, stomped like a little bug, Greg did not win. Are the siblings going to win? In a sense, they hint, going to see, after they meet up with their mom to track down Roman, right? Shout out Harriet Walter. She's always great as the mom in limited screen time. It's like, well, someone has to be the CEO. Only one person really can do it. And Kendall's like the most agreeable, sellable choice. So they decide that they're going to anoint Ken and let him do it because he definitely wants it the most. And it's like the most logical thing. And it's like, okay. So like they're all winning, even if technically Ken's the only one winning. And yet what happens? Shiv backs out. And it's like this whole thing. And like, man, in a sense, you could say it's super cringe watching these characters to expose themselves in front of everyone, the rest of the board, everyone else at the company, just kind of explode on each other in a conference room where they can be overheard. But, there was a key thing that had to come up again in this finale. It had not come up since the season 3 finale when Kendall brought it up. And that was, of course, that Kendall killed someone. What was that? Season 2, season 1? I forgot exactly when it happened. But of course, Kendall killed someone when he was, basically strung out. And he had told Roman and Shiv at the end of season 3. It came up. Not that like Kendall was ever going to go to jail. That's not what this was. But like, for whatever her reasons, including that, Shiv votes doesn't want Kendall to have the CEO. And it's like, on one hand, I think like Shiv as a character has not been super popular with viewers the last few weeks, like especially with America Decides. Like some of Shiv's decisions have irked the viewer, right? And this, it's like, oh, you're rooting for these people again, even though like they're not good people to want to root for. And when Shiv can't vote no on the deal, you get angry as a viewer, even though you don't necessarily should, right? It's like, is she not wrong to think that Ken shouldn't be the CEO? Does he deserve it? Would he be good at it? She doesn't think he'd be good at it. Do any of us think Kendall would be good at it? We watched him sell bullshit in Living Plus. He's good at selling the bullshit, but can he actually do it? And you have Roman drop the absolute fucking hammer once it's like really set. And it's like, we're bullshit. I'm bullshit, you're bullshit, we're bullshit. This is what we do. However, whatever he says, Roman is laying it out there to Kendall that what they do is grift. I mean, I was kind of floored. I was like, wow, that's it. That's the show. Like, they did it. And what happens as a result? None of them are involved. The company sells the Gojo. Tom Whamsgams, of all people, becomes the CEO. And honestly, he's one of the more experienced choices, right? He just has been working at ATN for some time. But Tom becomes the CEO. Shiv, by her own making, has Tom be the CEO, the job she wanted. And she thus seemingly will stay married in this loveless marriage that breaks them both down at every turn. And it's like a mind-boggling decision, and yet it makes complete sense. Like, makes complete dramatic sense. So, like, will Shiv ever be happy again? She chose her unhappy life and the person she detests, Tom. She chose that person winning over Kendall winning. It's pretty crazy. Roman, we saw how small and fucked up Roman is really really throughout the whole show, but especially in the back half of this season, right? He's a character that was so funny throughout the run of the show, just the one-liners, performance from Kieran Culkin, but truly, like, he just, as Kendall said last week, you fucked it. Like, he just doesn't have it, and Ken wants it so bad, and just can't do it. Couldn't get it done, and watching him just kind of walk off in a daze, basically, kind of wild stuff. I thought it was a really riveting finale. Just how this show kind of communicates, I think, family and power dynamics and people's obsession and desperation to remain close to power, whether that's someone like Tom at the top or someone low like Hugo or Carolina, stuff like that. Great episode for tons of the supporting cast too. I think it's a great Carl season, great Frank season. Jerry, everyone loves Jerry. Amazing Jerry season. Perhaps not the most screen time for Jerry throughout the course of the show, but I thought Jerry was great. Jess, I thought Jess, for the few small moments she did have, whether it's in America Decides talking to Greg, or when she wants a new position from Ken in the funeral episode, like, Jess, really great. I think it's just a show with such a deep bench. We don't get a lot of Stewie, but we love Arian Moayed. Can't say enough good things about Skarsgård as well. Obviously, this is his biggest role on the show. He's like a starring member this season, and the performance as Madsson is incredibly strong. The Madsson character, I think, really fit in well on this show and served like a really strong purpose, especially when after everything happened with the deal and post Logan. I really liked all that. I think it's frankly, the most significant thing Skarsgård's done in some time. Like, obviously, I love The Northman, but it wasn't a huge hit or anything. But like, it's I think a really knockout performance. Tom and Greg stuff as great as ever, right? That shout out the Disgusting Brothers, so fucking funny. But also, like, I think the Tom's relationship with Greg, I think, really like evolved and advanced as Greg became more of a capable operator as he can throughout the run of this show. All the Tom and Shiv's stuff was absolutely devastating. It's like the best acting that either of them has done on the show is usually in concert with them together. The apartment fight on the balcony, absolutely gutting, really letting everything all out at the end. Yeah, I mean, I think this is just one of the great shows. Like, I think it's that simple, you know. It's amazing, and I think it's on the HBO Mount Rushmore. Overall, it's in the greater television pantheon. I think that's undebatable. I think it's on the HBO Mount Rushmore. That is a competitive mountain to be on for sure. But yeah, let me know. How do you feel about that? Is Succession on your HBO Mount Rushmore? How'd you feel about Succession season 4? Let me know. I'll be in the comments. And for more TV reviews, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
All right, that's going to do it for us this week. Next week, I got some big stuff to talk about once again. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Part 1, animated film. Really excited to talk about that. Also, on HBO, we have The Idol from The Weeknd and Sam Levinson, starring Lee Rose Depp. Controversial, polarizing series from what we know about so far. I think there's a lot to get into there. Yeah, so more to come as well. Make sure you subscribe, youtube.com/nostalgiapod. Hit the link below. Let me know what's up, and I'll see you next week.